Hello, my name is Nathan Lott, and I'm the Policy Research Director and Advocacy Coordinator for Preservation Resource Center of New Orleans. If you've traveled around our city's historic neighborhoods lately, you've probably noticed a profusion of yard signs popping up in front of houses and on neutral grounds. That's because 2021 is an election year here in New Orleans. With Congress and the state legislature not on the ballot, all eyes are focused squarely on municipal races. As the saying goes, all politics is local. And that's especially true in preservation, where it's local governments that decide what gets built where and what gets torn down. Our city council plays a key role in preservation, zoning, and land use decisions. That's why PRC has launched a special voter education initiative to help our members and neighbors feel informed and inspired to head to the polls on November 13th. You can head on over to prcno.org and read verbatim responses to a questionnaire on cultural and historic preservation from 18 candidates seeking district seats on the council. All 7 seats are up for grabs this year, but the most hotly contested is at-large Division 2. It's a citywide race for an open seat on the council. Because all voters in New Orleans may cast a ballot in this race, we opted to sit down with the frontrunners for an extended conversation on key issues facing our city's historic neighborhoods. My conversation with Kristin Gisleson Palmer took place in early October 2021. I started out by asking the current District C council member why she decided to run for the at-large Division 2 seat.
I'm currently on the City Council, District C, and I feel very strongly that somebody with a District Council background is best suited for the at-large position. We have not had it this term, and I think it makes a difference. I think when you're a district council member, you're working with the hand in glove with all the neighborhood associations. You are dealing with all the different quality of life issues from violent crime to blighted housing to infrastructure. And it's often very reactionary as well at the district council level, because you have a small constituency, you're constantly dealing with the problems, helping projects get through your district, advocating for them. And so I really believe that at the citywide level, at the at-large level, we should take that experience, right, and try to fix some of these problems systemically. And that's really what I want to focus on when we talk about, for instance, I know this is the PRC, when we talk about blighted housing and how do we make neighborhoods that are beautiful for everyone, right? And it's really important when we look at our housing. Housing right now, to me, is one of the #1 issues in the city of New Orleans. And, we don't have a lack of housing. We have a lack of housing going into the marketplace. And that's what we have to talk about. We have more than enough housing. When you look at 25,000 roughly vacant blighted houses across the city, how do we more effectively get them into the marketplace, right? And that's what's going to create more affordability for everyone.
Yeah, that's great. I was just recently on a call that GNO Inc. put together about the new FEMA risk rating 2.0 for flood insurance. And that's a big topic that we don't need to go into now, but illustrates the complexity of housing and bringing housing stock online. That's one of the factors that we have to take into consideration here. And that's changing, and definitely, like you're saying, a systemic thing that is much bigger than just New Orleans. But you were alluding to how being a district council representative informs your approach to this at-large position. Could you talk a little bit about how the city council, as the city's chief land use authority, overseeing zoning and conditional uses and demolition requests, how that intersects with your goals for what you want to accomplish?
Well, that's the second part to the question, right? Is that the other reason why you need to have somebody with a background like mine at large is because one of the biggest responsibilities, I should say, with a council is land use. I have 8 years experience of very complicated land use issues. My district is perhaps the most complicated. It's the only district in the city that's reflective of the city, racially, demographically. It's urban, it's suburban. We probably have the most locally historic districts in the city. And so, I've constantly had to deal with that. And when we talk about demolition, I think, Nathan, you know how I operate. I always work with the neighborhoods. I call in the PRC when we have a demolition by neglect or request, because I want y'all to really look at these properties as well and advocate. And, my extensive background in preservation and rebuilding has also informed my decisions. As you know, and some of your viewers may know, I started out at the PRC, as the director of Christmas in October when I was in my 20s, and fixing up houses for low-income elderly homeowners, ensuring that they can age in place. And it's probably one of the best programs in the city in terms of really preventing the underlying effects of gentrification and allowing people to age in place, right? And so, and then it became Rebuilding Together, which I was director of that right after Katrina for several years, and built up one of the largest rebuild organizations in the city, working hand in glove with neighborhoods all over. And in fact, that program, I've worked in every single district across the city. Another reason why I'm very well suited for the at-large position, because the first time I've walked into these neighborhoods is not asking for a vote. It was working with the neighborhoods to really fix up their homes and bring people back after Katrina.
That's great. Well, you just touched on it a little bit. And yeah, I have to say our lines of communication have been great, and I've always appreciated your responsiveness and that of your staff on issues in the district, such as HDLC appeals. But could you talk a little bit about how, as an at-large, you would approach those circumstances where someone says, oh, I didn't get what I wanted out of the Bucray Commission or the Historic District Landmarks Commission, so I'm coming to the City Council. What would be your approach be, or what is your approach to appeals like that?
So my first approach really is to read the staff reports. I think it's really important to make educated decisions on an issue and look at all sides. And so first I read the staff report, and then I actually physically go out to the properties and look at them and see what the situation is. And I also talk to the neighborhood groups, and people that are immediately impacted by those. And that's really what informs my decision. Now, I will also say, though, that we as a city and city government aren't necessarily doing a great job either when it comes to HDLC and the VCC, the Bucray Commission, and safety and permits. And in fact, this is one of the reasons, again, why I'm running. We need to have more resources for all of those departments, because the time it takes to get permits is entirely too long. And what that causes, quite frankly, are people starting work without permits because they just don't want to wait anymore. And though that's not correct, as somebody who has renovated houses and somebody who's done new construction, I absolutely understand the importance of time and the importance of a city to be responsive. And the city has not done a good job with that. And that's another reason why I'm running. I really want to make sure that our vital departments like safety and permits, city planning commission, get the resources that they need. I look at these departments too as more economic development departments than an economic development department, because we cannot prevent people from rebuilding. We cannot prevent people from getting things done, and we can't do this alone, right? And so we need to make sure that our citizens have the tools to rebuild and to put out more housing units as quickly and as efficiently as they can.
Great. Yeah. So you're touching on something else I wanted to talk about. In addition to the land use oversight that the council has, that is so important to the work we do, the council also has the purse strings, right? The budgetary responsibility, rather uniquely has oversight of the Entergy local utility, like a utility regulator, and economic development, quality of life. So what are some of the ways that you see those non-land use aspects of the council responsibilities intersecting with your goals if you're elected?
Well, again, in housing, my experience is very practical. I'm a doer. So, we instituted after Katrina, when we were rebuilding and we had these gutted out homes, energy efficiency in everything that we did. We were not just doing insulation, we were doing radiant barriers. We were using low VOC paints. We were making sure that the materials, we used a lot of recycled materials because, as you know, I started a deconstruction program so that we could prevent things from going into landfill and reutilize a lot of our architectural elements from houses that were being demolished after Katrina. We were able to save so many doors and windows and mantles, and it was really a very effective program. So I am hugely in favor of, and then when I came into office, I kind of brought that with me. And we didn't, on the West Bank, we didn't have the Energy Smart program, right? I think the fastest way, the most efficient way to bring down utility prices and and be smart about this is through energy efficiency in the homes. And so that was a program that I pushed and got expanded into Algiers. I think the council needs to do more with expanding those kinds of programs, as well as hardening our system. And I think with this past storm, we've seen very, very clearly, so that we can really show that where we have to harden our system, because the storms are going to come in faster. The window is a lot smaller in terms for any type of evacuation. So we need to ensure that we have an infrastructure that can ensure that people who are staying and who are vulnerable are taken care of. And quite frankly, on the bigger side of that, the reason we have to hold them more accountable for hardening our system is it's really like when we look at businesses, you cannot operate, right? I'm having a business close for 6 days, 8 days, and we have to really make sure that we have better systems in place. A lot of that's going to be for people that can afford it, solar panels, and we've got a lot of good tax credits. I want to see more credits for, excuse me, for rooftop solar. And now that we have more efficient house batteries, I really think that's the direction people are going to go in lieu of those, the whole house generators. And so I think, again, we have to look at how we're going to ensure that that can live and coexist better. And I've actually been on the forefront of that as well, talking about and working with HDLC in terms of solar panels and how do you make that effective, in historic districts, on historic homes.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know perhaps that the National Park Service does have guidance on putting solar panels on historic buildings. And, now we have guidance on flood risk reduction too. So yeah, we have some best practices that are very compatible with resilience and sustainability.
And not just that. I mean, I don't think people know even that there's solar panels on the Basilica in Rome. So it's like, they're totally not incompatible. And in fact, it makes sense. Anything that you can use to stay in these homes and, for long term, it makes a lot of sense to do it. It really does.
Yeah.
Buildings learn over time.
Well, and you referenced in your answer their businesses, and we all, I think, we're reminded, even if we don't work in the hospitality sector, reminded by COVID and subsequent travails like Hurricane Ida of the significant role that the tourism hospitality sector plays in our city. It's done a lot of good in terms of employing people and also fixing up buildings to make them hotels, but it's also had some negative externalities, as it were, especially for the neighborhoods you represent currently that are closest to some of the most highly touristed areas. So I'm interested in your thoughts on how we strike the balance between hospitality and quality of life for our permanent residents.
So I'm a huge proponent of sustainable tourism, and that's one of the platforms that I'm actually running on. I think that we can coexist. We just have to do it smarter, right? And we have to define how we want to be as a city. And that should be defined by our residents, not by our tourists. I'm a firm believer that if you create a city that has a decent quality of life for the residents, then everything else follows. Then people will want to come visit, then businesses will want to move here. That's where really what we have to look at, right? So anytime we have a decision made, it should not be made if it's great for the tourists. It should be made if is it great for the residents of this city. And when we talk about it that way, and we talk about making our neighborhoods livable, then everything else follows. Now, in terms of what I mean by sustainable tourism, it's also something to promote local businesses. And a lot of our businesses do this the right way, right? And we see it constantly. We can't keep focusing tourism just on one little area. The city is a wonderful place to visit. It's a wonderful place to delve into these different neighborhoods. And when you go into different neighborhoods, that really uplifts local businesses. And that's really what we're talking about here, right? Obviously, we need the tourism economy, because it's wonderful to have we have more restaurants per capita than any other city, right? And you got to keep that going. We can't eat at all of them all the time. But and so what and it just makes sense. And I think you see a lot of the work that I've done from Blue Bikes, in terms of it's great for residents, but then it's also good because we get tourists doing, those types of things. When I expanded the streetcar line below Canal Street on North Rampart, these are things that, yes, they could be great for tourism, but first and primarily they're good for our residents, and it connects people to downtown, right? And to greater opportunities. And so really those are the kinds of things that we should really be looking at.
Yeah, I think that's so true that, the cities or the neighborhoods that work for residents work for tourists too, because we see that with, the desire for people to go into the Maroney or Bywater or 7th Ward and not just see, you know, for the convention center to French Market section of our downtown. You know, that's our most heavily touristed, but yeah, people want to get that quote authentic experience. And so they really do.
And I think my work with the short-term rental legislation proves that, right? You know, I'm not saying that all short-term rentals are bad. I'm saying that, you know, inside a residential neighborhood, you know, a short-term rental is the commercialization of a residential property. So if you look at it that way, then it should be in commercial districts, not in the middle of neighborhoods. So that is what when I talk about sustainable tourism, that kind of means that's what we're looking at, right? So when I changed the legislation and how it works, I made it so that if you wanted to have a whole house short-term rental, you had to have it in a place that was appropriately zoned. So that would mean like on the St. Claude, on a street, right? And then to further protect the neighbor, because you also don't want to have then mini hotels that takes away the retail space and the bricks and mortar on the first floor. I made it so it could only be on the second floor, right? Or set back. And so I think, again, that's smart. But if you want to have a short-term rental and you're owner occupied, right? Because that's not what the problem has been in our neighborhoods. The problem has been whole house short-term rentals like mini hotels. So if you want to have, if you as a homeowner want to have one, you can absolutely. And I even expanded it that you could have up to 3 if it's a, you know, if it's a raised shotgun double, if it's appropriate into the style of the house, right? And because the shared economy is good, also it works with our vernacular architecture when you talk about a shotgun double, and with the cost of living, you know, I think it's good for people to be able to you know, pay for some of these houses to allow for home affordability and home ownership. So those are things that I was looking at very clearly doing that. And also, you know, we have to be very cognizant that our city is only right at 400,000. It was built at the zenith in 1960. We had 623,000 people in the city of New Orleans. So we really do need to have a thoughtful approach when we look at all this vacant and blighted housing. How can it be put into commerce and how it can provide housing for our residents first and foremost, right? But how do we also get access to people so that they can actually purchase those houses and get them renovated?
That's great. Yeah, I think sometimes when we think about housing, we're tempted to compare ourselves to places like Silicon Valley, where, you know, there's this intense pressure on the housing situation because there's been so much population growth. And what you're pointing out is that, you know, we actually have a lot more in common with cities that sometimes we may not like so much, like Cleveland or, you know, Baltimore or Detroit.
Right.
So yeah, I'm interested to know what do you see as New Orleans kind of peer cities, and how can we learn from other places around America or the world and bring some of that here?
Well, I think we have some broken systems that I want to fix. We all know that. I think we need to look at, you know, one of the things I'm doing is bringing the Office of Inspector General in to look at, first off, enforcing the short-term rental laws that we have, which, you know, the administration's not done a good job with. But secondarily, to also look at homestead exemption fraud, because I think that's something that's very prevalent. And so he's already found over 70 cases of that. That puts more money back on the tax rolls, which lessens the burden for the rest of us. We're also finding instances of homestead exemption fraud in the short-term rental industry where people are getting, you know, fake ones so that they can open a short-term rental. And so again, you know, by enforcing laws, you see, right, by not enforcing and saying they want the $500 permit fee, that's penny wise, pound foolish. If you hold everybody accountable, you're actually getting more revenue in that can make all of our lives much better. But I think we also, again, it goes back to not having a good safety and permits department and not getting permits out the door and allowing people to build. We have builders and contractors that are rebuilding houses and building new construction houses in St. Bernard and Jefferson Parish because it's easier to do business there than in Orleans. That's preventing us from getting houses into the marketplace, you know, and I'm a firm believer too in expanding, and I've done this many times, is expanding the cultural products district to allow for more historic tax credits. That's something else that that when you look at that, it gets more properties back, you know, it makes the numbers work when you renovate properties. And so we really need to expand that through more areas of the city, because that allows for small developers to go in and produce more housing units, right? I also am increasing the NIF fund, the Neighborhood Improvement Fund, and that's, we get money from the short-term rental per night fee that the visitor pays. It goes into this fund that allows for things like soft seconds, so that people can actually afford to buy homes. And I think that's a really important thing that we have to look at when we talk about trying to build more wealth and equity in our city, is really through home ownership. So those are the things that I want to work with. I also think we have to change some zoning laws to allow for more development on substandard lot sizes. Right now in the city of New Orleans, in many desirable neighborhoods, we have small lots. We can build small houses on them. Some of our zoning codes are not allowing that. They're saying you have to have off-street parking, you have to have this, you have to have that, which is ridiculous. Then it doesn't make the numbers work. And we could really produce a lot more units in desirable areas that are close to amenities if we change some of those laws. And so right now I'm working with City Planning Commission to do that. So I think also I want to go back to our vernacular housing styles. These shotgun doubles, my very first house at 24, I bought with my husband right after we were married. I bought a shotgun double for $35,000, right on the river. And we were able to renovate it ourselves and live in it while we did it. And then when we rented out the other side, we weren't making much money at all. But by doing that, it gave us more freedom. And it gave us a lot more, and we were able to increase our equity over time. And then we were able to mortgage that and, move into this house, so it's really, these shotgun doubles are amazing. But the problem is the way that we have appraisers appraise them. And a lot of that's based in redlining, I think. And what they're doing is they're appraising these shotgun doubles at less per square foot than a single family house. And that makes no sense. So what that does is that means that somebody that renovates a double, you have to put in 2 kitchens, 4 bathrooms, which is much more money than turning it into a single, right? That if you turn it into a single, you're actually appraised higher, even though you've put more money into a double. We have to, and I would love to work with the PRC to really talk with the state and the State Appraisers Association, because that is really making us lose a lot more housing units in the city. But what it's also preventing are people that are young, like, when I was many years ago starting out, to get these doubles that make it then affordable for them to own a home. And I think that's something we also have to look at. I think also the way we appraise this appraiser, that the assessor appraises property is wrong. I've seen other cities that put more value on vacant land and less value on the house on it or the built structure on it, because what that does is it incentivizes more people to invest in their property, and then it disincentivizes people to hold on to a vacant lot. And that forces people to put them more into commerce, and then at the same time investing in property that they own. That's other cities are doing this. It is a much smarter approach. We see way too many vacancy. This city is ripe, is absolutely ripe. We should be seeing more development all over in terms of housing production and renovating blighted housing. And I think that would really help incentivize that.
That's great.
You probably get learning, too much to go on the housing front. I'm sorry, but
that's fine. No, actually, you brought up renovation and historic tax credits in your answer, and I was recently learned from our Cultural Resources and Tourism Office, the Lieutenant Governor's shop, the SHPO, as it's sometimes known, that there are 3,000 construction jobs in this congressional district of Louisiana that are supported by the historic tax credit. That's the federal credit. We also have a state companion. All of that goes into commercial development. So it's not always a great tool for what you're describing, but at least our housing stock with doubles does allow for people to claim a credit on the portion that's going to be rented. And a lot of people don't know that it is a tool that's available. If they were restoring a double, they could potentially get historic tax credits, not on the half that they're going to live in, but on the half that they're going to rent out to help cover some of those added costs. But
that's absolutely true. And same with the real estate tax abatement, that can also be utilized if you're going to do it. And I also think when you look at small developers that are renovating a double or a quad or a single family house for resale, when you renovate some of these older homes, it's so costly. And then post COVID, construction materials have gone up significantly. Labor's gone up significantly. And quite frankly, the only way to make some of these projects work are historic tax credits. And so, sometimes people want to know why certain neighborhoods are coming back faster than others or look different. And a lot of that has to do with make, if the numbers work, and often the numbers only work if they're within a cultural products district, and that's what makes you eligible for historic tax credits. So I am a firm believer in expanding the cultural products throughout the city to really help incentivize renovations.
Yeah, that's something that I've been able to help with, at least in part of the 7th Ward. And you're exactly right that, they're essentially the same house in one neighborhood, or the same commercial building in one neighborhood, same era, similar materials, might be eligible for an incentive, and in another neighborhood might not be. And when you look at the buildings side by side, you're like, well, why is this? And you understand those systems, and there's we can do to change some of that. I'm also interested in the economic opportunity that's created for people that are in the building trades. And you have such direct experience in this, the small investors, and also then the carpenters, the electricians, the plumbers. So do you have some thoughts on what New Orleans is doing well or poorly, or should be doing to do equitable workforce development, particularly around those opportunities?
Well, I'll tell you, I'm building, a house, a couple houses now, and my builder, who I've worked with from the very beginning, is a DBE builder. And what's amazing is when you hire a DBE prime, all the subs are DBEs, and that is something that I've learned over time. And I think it makes a lot of sense that we really have to create more opportunities in the building trades for that, because when we talk about equity and building wealth in the city, housing is economic development. You pay good wages for electricians, plumbers, carpenters, and these are jobs that are not going to be replaced by AI. It's just not. And so, I really believe we need to do more with our trades. We need to do more, with our community colleges to really promote that. I think we need to promote it more in our high schools. Not everybody's cracked up, to do that, to go to college. It's something, I tell my daughters all the time, I wish one of them was an electrician, one was a plumber, and one was HVAC, and we wouldn't have a problem. I do think too, though, that we also need to focus more on training programs that really deal with preservation, because again, those are also very desirable. We have some incredible mill shops in this town that I don't think people are aware of, that do that mill windows and doors, and they are just phenomenal, and they are always busy. And we have some incredible talent in the city that is going to be needed forever. That doesn't go away. Anybody that owns an old house knows that. So I would like to see more of that. I would like to see more. I'm concerned about losing some of our plasterers and our brick masons, are things that have also kind of gone by the wayside. Charleston does a great job. They have their preservation society, which is interesting because it's really more of a membership organization, but they have an incredible brick masonry program that they've done for many, many years, that it would be interesting for New Orleans to do something similar.
Yeah, that's great. That sort of holistic view of preservation, as something that is intimately intertwined with economic development in our city. That's the kind of thing that I think I would like to see in a citywide preservation plan, which is something, as you probably know, that was recommended in the plan for the 21st century, the city's master plan, when it was passed in 2010, but it still hasn't been funded. So even though we have this document from city planning that says we should have a preservation plan, we haven't yet had the resources or resolve to do that. So I'm interested, if you're elected, will you help us find the funds and the staffing to make that a priority?
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's, when I was running and created the salvage yard, and we were doing quite well with it, not only were we created jobs from trash, because people were throwing away doors, windows, mantles after Katrina, it also stopped stuff from going into landfill, and it became a revenue stream, which then also produced tax dollars, all from waste. And we really should be using, when we talk about demolitions, some demolitions might have to occur. That, I know that some things are really horrible, but the lumber in and of itself should always be salvaged and always be reused to mill flooring, I often use, when you take a wall out, you can reuse it for another part of the house. I think it's really important to reuse these materials. It's green, as we say, the greenest house is one that's already built. A lot of folks don't know that. They don't realize that, for every square foot of new construction house, over 7 pounds of construction waste are generated. So renovation is a really smart way to go. And that's all part of the greening, of the city and what we have to do with this environment in this country and this world. So it just makes a tremendous amount of sense.
Yes. Yeah, a lot of people don't know that the significant amount of construction waste far outstrips household waste in the city that has recently grappled with what to do with its household waste. But you only need to drive by one of our recycling yards to see how much is piled up right now in post-Hurricane Ida debris and refrigerators and dishwashers and air conditioners and things that people have taken to be stripped for scrap. But yeah, the subject of Hurricane Ida and what you're talking about.
So too, as well, a renovation actually employs more people than a new construction house as well. So, and those jobs often are more local and they stay local and more money stays within the economy. So again, it just makes so much sense all the way around.
Great. Yeah, well, I was just going to say, you've touched on this sort of maybe indirectly in talking about renewable energy and about the inherent sustainability, waste reduction of reuse. But I think Hurricane Ida just reminded a lot of people in Southeast Louisiana about the real significant threat of climate change and the reality of climate change. So what are some things you'd like to see the city of New Orleans doing to act on climate directly?
So I've been very passionate about this and have done a lot of work with neighborhoods even before I came back into office. I have served 8 years, but I had a little 4-year hiatus. And so in between that, I started working with a nonprofit called Soul Planting in this neighborhood that I live in and work in. And we've done now in 5 years, 6 years, about 1,000 trees have been planted in this one neighborhood. And when we talk about climate change, I am a huge believer in rebuilding our canopy, our tree canopy. We lost over 100,000 trees, at least post-Katrina. You driving around after Ida, you see that. Trees prevent, subsidence. They help prevent flooding. They keep the water table where it needs to be. They help cool down the communities and the neighborhoods. And this means a lot for neighborhoods that, not every neighborhood looks like the Garden District, and we have to ask ourselves why that is. And in fact, right now I'm working with a group, I See Change, and they've actually started doing heat island studies in New Orleans. So you have neighborhoods in New Orleans that are 10 degrees hotter than a neighborhood, say, like the Garden District. And you can imagine with the heat and the rising temperatures, what that does. It does what it does to your health, what it does to your electricity bills. And so, I've worked with that with Soul as well and the city to push through a tree inventory. So right now we're in their inventory. And so we now know too, where there's maps where we need to put trees. So we need to really focus on reforesting the city of New Orleans. And to get there, we need to plant about 1 million trees. I know it sounds crazy, but it really isn't. If we have about 400,000 people here, that's just 2.5 trees per person. I think we can totally do that. And so that's one thing that I'm really focused on, that and green infrastructure. I think at the city council level and at large, I really want to focus on how we really make sense with our land use and ensuring that every time there is a land use issue, that becomes part of our ethos, right? And I think we can do that as a city.
Yes, I can vouch for the good work of Soul. They planted some cypress trees and some, I think, maybe red maples in a park near my house. So
we're going to be doing that tomorrow. Again, they're going to be doing a planting. And then all my work with transportation and bike lanes and public transit that I've been a huge, I chair transportation. I'm a huge advocate with that. That is something as well. What we did with We redid the management of the ferries, and we're soon going to have a ferry system, that's going to tie in different areas. We'll have a ferry route that's going to go up to Audubon because we can. We have the infrastructure there. And so imagine what that can do for a lot of folks. So, and that's also when we talk about sustainable tourism, what that looks like. You get people off the street, off the congestion of Magazine Street or Chapatulas, and you put them on the river. It makes a lot more sense. And so we're looking at things like that. I'd love to see the ferry go all the way up to Rivertown and then have shuttles to the airport from there, which again, imagine just taking, instead of going I-10, you have a quick boat ride up to the airport. So, this is what other cities do. And this is how we have to start re-envisioning how we want New Orleans to be.
Yeah, I remember as a young man, first job out of college was at a publishing house in Birmingham. And this was obviously some time ago. I'm not as young as I used to be. And there was a circulator bus. It was just free, hop on, hop off, to get people who work downtown to go and eat out for lunch more, or go to businesses downtown. And it's very simple things that could have a really big impact when you make it possible not to drive everywhere.
Right. And I'm working right now on trying to get, I think we should have a free youth pass for public transit for 24 and under. I've been working with the RTA right now. Right now we have a reduced fare of 50 cents for youth under 24, but I'd like to see that. That's kind of like a pilot to see how that works. But, if we have free transit for our youth, first off, it connects them to jobs, to resources, to school, to things, which is really important. But then it also creates the ethos of using public transit more, right? And so as you age out, it just becomes part of what you do. And even the younger generations, I mean, that's what they prefer, public transit, and we really have to start focusing more on that as well.
Yeah, well, you can have your earbuds in and listen to your podcast or whatever, or TikTok on your phone or whatever you want to do when you're on a bus. You can't do that when you're driving. Two more things I want to make sure we talk about in the time we have together. And the first of those is public buildings. So, if we were to do a citywide preservation plan, I'd certainly hope there would be a section on public buildings. It's something that I hear about a lot from neighborhood associations. We've got some that are gyms like Gallier Hall, and then we've got some that are like the NSA facility down in Bywater, sources of great consternation and seemingly intractable pieces of blight scattered around the city. So what are your thoughts about the way that the city council and the administration should work together to steward our public buildings?
So I've said from the very beginning, I think we need a municipal buildings commission that looks at all of our public buildings and we create a plan. And I think that, and I asked that from the past two administrations when they wanted to put a city hall someplace else. I said, we have to look at our total inventory first and see what we have and what makes the most sense, right? And we have to put it back into commerce. There's no reason that we're holding on to some of these properties. I've worked for years over here in Algiers when we're finally able to get the Tourist Shakespeare building, which is a beautiful historic building that's been vacant and blighted. Finally get an RFP, it's been awarded, and that will be housing, which is fabulous. I'm super excited about that. We have to do more of that. And we also need to look at this. We definitely need a new city hall, but I don't necessarily think that, I definitely don't think it needs to go anywhere in municipal auditorium or in that area. But I do think we need to look within and say, the building we're in could also use historic tax credits, can also be renovated. There's also available land in the area. And we've been given multiple buildings from the VA that we should look at as well and really kind of master plan this out. And then we have valuable property in other places that should be redeveloped. And then it could also create a revenue stream for any type of wherever, we decide where we want to put a new city hall or renovate the existing one, then we could figure out, a financing vehicle as opposed to just wanting to throw bond money at that, where we all know that we need more bond money to hit our streets, and to fix our streets. So I think that we should look at these properties in that terms. And first, obviously, as a neighborhood and community blight, but also as funding vehicles and getting more redevelopment and producing more housing units.
Okay. And you referenced bond money. So that indirectly implicates taxation and property taxes in particular, which is what pay back those bonds in large part. And I know you're well aware that Orleans Parish has a significant amount of property, not just the city-owned buildings, but significant amount of property that is not on the property tax rolls. So I'm interested in your thoughts on whether or not it's time to look at something like a parcel fee that helps fund.
I've been an
fire
advocate for that. Yeah, we need a parcel fee. I've been talking about this for a while, and then Councilmember Moreno just took it and set up a commission to look at it. And I don't think they've met during COVID. So that's something that I'm just ready to move on. And so that's what we're going to be doing when I'm at large, is we need to have a parcel fee. And, to have so much property not in the stream, and you can't just say it's because they're a nonprofit. I mean, I ran a nonprofit, this, Nathan, y'all are a nonprofit. You put it in your budget in terms of what the cost of doing business is. And the cost of doing business, whether you're a nonprofit or a for-profit, is everybody uses the streets. Everybody uses the fire, the police, the water. So we really need to make sure that those essential services are also paid for. And that's why we need a parcel fee. So, and this is a whole nother thing when we're talking about how do we incentivize property to get back into the marketplace, to be utilized for that as well.
Yeah, I've certainly seen that there are people sitting on property, if they're not paying taxes for it, they don't have the impetus to put it back to use or to generate some revenue through rents. All right, well, I know that you have another engagement on your busy calendar coming up. Is there anything that we didn't touch on that you think you really want to share?
I really appreciate your time and doing this with all the candidates. I think it's really important to have these conversations in a city that has so much housing stock available, and it can be done thoughtfully and reflect the city. I think our built environment reflects our physical environment. And we have a lot of opportunities, and we need to look at this as an opportunity to really make our city more vibrant and alive. And so I just want to thank you for your time.
Well, thank you. Current City Council District C Representative Kristin Gisleson Palmer, candidate for City at-Large Council District Division 2. And the election is November 13th. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.